Hello and welcome. It's 10 a.m. on Tuesday, the 24th of February. You're tuned into our mid-morning newscast here on Arirang TV. It's great to have you with us on this relatively smog-free day here in Seoul. I'm Mark Broome. Let's take a look at what's making the headlines. South Korea makes another push for talks with North Korea, but Pyongyang says Seoul has to cancel its annual military drills with Washington for that to happen. Korea's household debt edges closer to a staggering $1 trillion US, buoyed by low borrowing costs and eased lending requirements. Plus, US President Barack Obama warns states they'll feel the impact if the Department of Homeland Security is forced to shut down because of a lack of funding. Our top story this morning, South Korea has reiterated its call for dialogue with North Korea just days after Kim Jong-un personally oversaw live-fire drills near the inter-Korean maritime border. But North Korea says it will refuse to hold talks unless Seoul scraps its upcoming joint military drills with Washington. Now, Hwang Sang-hee starts us off.
South Korea on Monday urged North Korea to drop any military provocations that could disturb peace on the Korean peninsula. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un reportedly inspected live fire drills near the inter-Korean maritime border during the Lunar New Year holiday last week. Seoul's Unification Ministry responded by reiterating its call for dialogue.
Regardless of the current situation, we remain open to inter-Korean talks.
North Korea issued a series of threats ahead of the annual joint military exercises between South Korea and the United States, scheduled for early March. The North state-run Nodongshinmun newspaper said Monday that if South Korea conducts its rehearsal for invading the North with the U.S., South Korean waters will become a site of death. Although Seoul and Washington say the drills are defensive in nature, Pyongyang views them as a practice for war. The paper reiterated that South Korea must end all military hostilities, including the upcoming exercises, if it is sincere about improving inter-Korean ties. North Korea has yet to accept South Korea's offer for talks made nearly 2 months ago. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
And while we're speaking of talks with Pyongyang, the United States is sticking to its position of seeking dialogue with North Korea while firmly responding to the regime's provocations. But experts say that with no shortage of other serious challenges to U.S. national security, North Korea has fallen well down the pecking order in terms of Washington's priority list. Choi Yoo-sun reports.
At the start of 2015, Washington slapped additional sanctions on Pyongyang for its alleged hacking of Sony pictures late last year. In a State of the Union address later in the same month, however, President Barack Obama excluded any reference to North Korea. Then came the U.S. president's controversial YouTube interview in which he said the North Korean regime will eventually collapse as the internet penetrates further into the reclusive country.
And it is very hard to sustain that kind of brutal authoritarian regime in this modern world.
The State Department's official overseeing East Asian affairs days later said that bringing change to North Korea doesn't necessarily involve a collapse of the current leadership.
The fact of the matter is, we don't have a hostile policy. We have a denuclearization policy.
Washington's point man on North Korea, Sung Kim, reportedly failed at a recent attempt to engage with the North in a third country. While Kim has said the U.S. has always taken a two-track approach of enforcing sanctions and keeping the door to dialogue open, it seemed odd for the administration to make such a conciliatory gesture immediately after imposing new sanctions. Analysts suggest with the latest proposal, the administration sought to hold the North accountable for the impasse rather than actually resume talks. North Korea chumming up with Russia as of late is also not a welcome development for the U.S., especially as Moscow has invited both the South and North Korean leaders to its World War II commemorative ceremony in May. And that, according to some analysts, prompted President Obama to cause a stir. All in all, crises in the Middle East and Ukraine, along with prolonged deadlock in the North Korean issue, are thought to have diverted the White House's attention away from Pyongyang. Choi Yoo-sun, Arirang News.
South Korea's Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se says a revised nuclear accord between Seoul and Washington will help the two allies strengthen their ties. Speaking to a delegation from the Council on Foreign Relations on Monday, Minister Yoon said he hopes talks to revise the cooperative agreement will conclude in the near future. For the past 4 years, the two countries have been discussing a revision that would allow Seoul to reprocess spent nuclear fuel for research and development. The minister added that the two countries are also in talks over President Park Geun-hye's planned visit to the United States this year. Japan says it's considering raising a regional ceremony claiming the Korea-controlled Dokdo Island as Japanese territory to a central government event. Tokyo-based Kyodo News was reporting what Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshihide Suga said on Monday. When asked about the ruling party's 2012 general election pledge to raise the status of the so-called Takashima Day event. Takashima is what the Japanese call the rocky Korean islets off the eastern coast of Korea. Suga added Tokyo cannot accept Seoul's latest protest against the Abe administration, sending a senior government official to the Takashima Day ceremony, this back on Sunday. In Korea, civic groups continued to hold rallies for a second day, calling for an end to the annual ceremony and Tokyo's continual claims to Dokdo. Meanwhile, the Japanese Crown Prince says it's important for the older generation in Japan to correctly pass down Japan's wartime history to future generations. At a press conference marking his 55th birthday this week, Prince Naruhito said, he emphasized the need to look humbly on the past. He then expressed sorrow for the pain and sadness felt by so many during World War II. While Japan marks the 70th anniversary of its surrender in the war this year, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is preparing a statement which regional neighbours worry could try and whitewash Japan's imperialist aggressions. Back here in Korea, and fears are growing that the country's household debt load could become unsustainable soon, as latest figures show it has snowballed to nearly $1 trillion US. Low borrowing costs and an easing of lending requirements is only exacerbating this problem. For a closer look at the implications of the debt mountain, Hwang Jie reports.
Korea's household debt shot up by almost $58 billion last year. In a report to the National Assembly on Monday, the Bank of Korea said that household loans by banks rose around $33 billion in 2014, and for non-banking institutions, $24 billion. When adding credit card bills and loans extended by all financial institutions like insurance companies, the total amount of household debt last year was estimated at over $980 billion. That means each Korean is in the red by about $20,000, considering the country's population that stands at around 50 million. Mortgage loans took up 80% of the total household debt, stemming from the central bank's 2 rounds of rate cuts that left the key rate at a record-matching low. The surge in debt was also spurred by the government's attempts to boost home transactions by easing real estate regulations. Experts are concerned that this growing household debt could drag down the domestic economy by denting private spending. They say households tend to refrain from spending even though their income may be rising, because they either use the extra money to pay off their debt or to save up. Hwang Jie, Arirang News.
Staying with economic news, and Korea's central bank chief says he stands by the current easing policy to help the economy maintain its growth momentum. He added the central bank will also seek some financial stability for the nation. Speaking to Parliament on Monday, Bank of Korea Governor Lee Ji-yeol said that while the recovery remains weak, his outlook was rosy based on the global economic rebound and low oil prices. Asked whether the BOK will further cut or raise the key interest rate, kept at a record low of 2% since last October, Lee said the decision would depend on the economic situation. The central bank had raised concerns about high levels of household debt and its impact on the economy once the rate is brought back up. Korea's shipbuilding industry was once one of the main driving forces for the country's economic growth, but a recent OECD report says that if the sector continues to struggle as it has been doing the last few years, it could start to have a seriously detrimental effect on the entire Korean economy. Kim Min-ji reports.
Korea's shipbuilding industry is facing serious challenges to getting itself back on solid footing. This according to a recent OECD report that says the global economic crisis has dented the industry's finances. The profitability, or EBITDA, on sales of publicly traded Korean shipbuilders stood at around 5% in 2012, in contrast to the 11% in 2008. EBITDA refers to the earnings before the deduction of interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization expenses. The figure also falls short of the levels recorded by companies in Japan, China, and Germany. The OECD report also points out that the ability of Korean shipbuilders to generate enough profit to cover their debts has declined significantly since 2007. It says while their average debt levels were less than 1.5 times larger than their profit in 2007, the ratio was above 6 in 2012. To be financially stable, a company's debt level should not be more than 3 times its profit. The shipbuilders' weak performance has also led to more government involvement, with government agencies increasing their ownership role in the industry and taking on more risk. If the situation were to continue, the report warns it could have an impact on employment and the financial sector, which could result in a domino effect on the economy as a whole. In dealing with the aftermath of the crisis, the report says the government needs to maintain a level playing field between public and private entities and manage its risks. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Apple stock has set yet another closing record at $133 a share, giving the iPhone maker a market capitalization that is more than 4 times larger than Samsung Electronics. Apple's stock price surged 2.7% on Monday as investors continued to display their seemingly insatiable appetite to snap up the company's shares. Apple's market cap now stands at almost $775 billion as it rides on the wave of its popular iPhone 6 models. It's pulling away from Samsung, which has been having a tough time competing with Apple at the top end of the smartphone market. On top of that, the Korean firm has Chinese manufacturers snapping at its ankles at the lower end. Now, lots of people complain that their smartphone battery drains too quickly, and unless you use your device very lightly, and let's face facts, who does that? You'll be lucky to have much juice left at the end of the work day. But there are some quick and easy tips to help you prolong your battery life by using your smart device in a smarter way. Shin Se-min reports.
We make calls, text, take photos, watch videos, play games, the list goes on. Smartphones have permeated every part of our daily routine, but for some reason they can't seem to get through today on a single charge.
3번이요.
저는 2번. 하루에 배터리를 스페어 하나 사서 3개 쓰고 있습니다.
한 2-3번 정도 충전하고 있어요.
하루에 3-4번 이상 충전기에 꽂고 충전하는 편이에요.
Korea's Electric Technology Research Institute recently released a guidebook pinpointing some of the ways you can prolong your phone's battery life.
One thing you can do is to keep your phone at room temperature. Your lithium-ion-based batteries rely on electrically charged atoms, and they work the best at warm temperatures. So fear out as the temperature drops, it is likely that your smartphone battery will drain more quickly. But if you must stay out and still want to keep that last inch of your battery life, just cover it up with a smartphone case or simply put it in a pocket. Another tip, never let it drop to zero. Unlike the nickel-based batteries in older phones, the batteries in smartphones are designed to be charged frequently. So don't wait until your battery dies. Even if it's fully charged, it's better to keep the phone plugged in for another 2 hours so the energy is distributed to every part of the battery. Also, switch off the vibrate function and don't turn your phone on and off. It'll only drain your battery power. Dim the screen and disable the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth functions whenever possible. Kill applications if you're not using them. And cut back on unnecessary push notifications. Another Facebook update can wait. And you can always track your battery use through apps that'll help show you how to save up and stay charged. 신세민, 아리랑 뉴스.
Now, in the United States, President Barack Obama is warning of a looming shutdown of his country's security department, which could run out of money at the end of the month. For more on this and other global stories, we are joined by Eunice Kim at the News Center. So, Eunice, a shutdown is looking increasingly likely, and this couldn't come at a worse time, really, amid the global terror alert that's happening at the moment. What does this mean for the United States exactly?
Well, Mark, if the agency is forced to shut down, it would mean an immediate furlough for 15% of the Homeland Security's department staff. That's including front office and administrative personnel, while other essential staff would be forced to stay on but work without pay. Speaking before a meeting of state governors at the White House, President Obama said the partial shutdown would have a direct impact on America's national security and economy, as it would mean leaving hundreds of thousands of airport security, border patrol, and port inspection agents without a paycheck. The deadline to move is February 27th. That is this Friday, just days away. And a Homeland Security appropriations bill has been stuck in the Senate following House amendments that would strip funding from Obama's executive orders on illegal immigration. Democrats have said that they would not support anything less than a clean spending bill that does not attach it to Obama's decision to lift deportation to some 5 million undocumented immigrants in the U.S.
And Eunice, over in France, 1 month now after January's terror attacks, the government there has stepped up to try and prevent further acts of terror, this time by confiscating the passports of 6 French nationals.
Yeah, that's right. These 6 are believed to have been preparing an imminent trip to Syria, according to authorities, to join radical Islamist groups. The French Interior Minister said the government was processing 40 more such administrative bans from travel, which are good for 6 months with a possibility for renewal and can be appealed against in court. The seizure of travel documents is the first adoption of an anti-terrorism measure that France had passed back in November targeting suspected jihadists. The minister says some of the initial 6 had come to their attention through a hotline put into place last year, while others were identified through ongoing investigations.
We wanted this measure because if French people leave to commit acts of violence in Iraq and Syria, upon their return they represent an even greater danger for the national territory and risk committing wide-scale terrorist acts motivated only by an instinct of violence.
And France isn't the only country being proactive. Australia's Prime Minister Tony Abbott on Monday announced tough anti-terror measures, including revoking or suspending citizenship for dual nationals who are found to be involved in terrorism. The UK and Germany have in place measures similar to France that enables the confiscation of passports of suspected would-be jihadists, while Sweden is in the process of drafting such a law, Mark.
Well, Eunice, thank you very much for those news updates, and we'll see you back at noon.
See you then.
And a good Tuesday morning to you all as we kick things off in football, where FIFA execs will meet later today in Doha to discuss the possibility of hosting the 2022 World Cup in Qatar during winter. But reports indicate it's most likely going to happen. Now, with the extreme heat being an issue, what was once a rumor is turning into reality as FIFA executives will plan out how they're going to go about having the major football event during wintertime, then finalize it in March. But it'll affect the leagues all around the world, including the K-League Classic, where the tail end of the season will take place around that time, with teams fighting for the league title. Now, one of the top awards a Korean athlete can receive here in the nation is the Korean Olympic Committee's Grand Prize. And on Monday, that award went to not Kim Yeon-ah nor Son Yeon-jae, but Park Seung-hee. Now, the 22-year-old who won 2 gold medals and a bronze during last year's Sochi Winter Games claimed the grand prize during the 61st Korean Olympic Committee Awards ceremony on Monday, grabbing the title as the top athlete here in Korea. Now, the former short track star, who's now competing in speed skating, hopes to win more medals as a speed skater during the 2018 Pyeongchang Winter Games. Now, the person who's been training Park Seung-hee in her quest to become a world-class speed skater is the 2-time Olympic gold medalist Lee Sang-hwa. But fortunately for her, her season has now come to an end. Now, after failing to win a single medal for the first time in 7 years during the single distances speed skating championships, Lee Sang-hwa has come out stating that she'll have to shut down her season and cancel all her scheduled events. With fatigue and injured left knee being the reason for her recent struggles, she has decided to take a break and treat her knee in time for the 2015-2016 season. Now, whichever sport you play, you always remember your very first victory. And especially if that first win took so long to get, just like Korean-American James Han during the 2015 Northern Trust Open. Now, with the 34-year-old finding himself tied with Dustin Johnson and Paul Casey after the 18th hole over the weekend, he nails a long birdie putt on the 3rd playoff hole to clinch his very first PGA Tour title of his career. And with this first victory came a huge jump in the world golf rankings as he climbs up 211 spots and is now ranked 86th in the world. Meanwhile, for Bae Sang-moon, who's still facing military duty issues, finished tied for 8th and is now ranked 75th in the world, up 4 spots from before. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Good morning. The level of yellow dust finally has returned to the normal level, but the amount of fine dust remains very high across the nation, though this very high fine dust level is expected to go back to the normal range as the day moves on, and big temperature gaps are in store. Today's sub-zero morning lows will hike up to 7 later on here in Seoul, and other parts, including Busan, will also have big temperature difference, so dress accordingly to avoid catching a cold. Lots of people are getting sick these days, and cold lasts this long, so take good care of your health. And as for the daily highs in other regions, the high in Daegu and Gwangju will rise to 11 and 10 later on, respectively. And as for the other regions, Jeju Island and Daejeon should see a high of 10 and 9. Now, tomorrow should be the mildest of the week. Then sporadic rain tomorrow night will bring down the temperatures to a chilly side, so dress warmly throughout the week. That's all for Korea, and here's international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, that's all we have for now. Plenty more stories both online and on our smartphone application. I'll be back with Ojin Ju at noon Korea time with our next newscast, News on at Noon. Until then, goodbye.